January of 2020, there was a mass shutdown of schools in the United States lasting over a year. This resulted in a major gap in learning and socialization for many students. While it may have seemed temporary, this event marked the beginning of major social changes, some of which would have a permanent impact. We interviewed staff at Brookline High School to see what changes they noticed as a result of the pandemic and what will never return to normal.
Students became much more isolated, so mental health difficulties really increased overall. And I think that learning became a lot harder. I think the biggest piece was the social, emotional, the mental health of kids. So I think it was really hard. I think that the effects on students, again, that social isolation, not being able to interact with friends, especially for younger kids. Developmentally, we learn from our experiences and being with kids, and when you're younger, you're playing on the playground, and if you see someone push someone, you then learn not to do that, and that's not an acceptable behavior. It's something where I think there's been a lot of regression in kids and adults alike being able to have normal social lives now. I think the isolation and kind of we as humans need connection and socialization to live. Most people think it's just like food, water, air, but we're born to socialize, and that was cut off from a lot of people, if not everyone, and that affected a lot of kids. It has lasting effects, and I'm definitely seeing that. I think there's going to be changes for sure. Again, in how kids communicate, behavioral effects, because if you had a first grader who was supposed to be on Zoom, remote learning, and they were just running around or trying to learn, the difference between an apple and a cat or how to pronounce them, it's a way different learning environment than a normal first grade class.
The first few months of the pandemic were really hard. We were not really clear what was happening. We were told to wait on our communication with our students for a couple weeks. Those first few months were really hard. I would sit on the floor of my room and record Zoom lectures just to try to, keep the rigor up as much as I could. Even the year or two after COVID, there were so many mental health concerns because pandemic had so many effects outside of the academic world that we tried to focus on those aspects. And
Is there anything that you think won't return back to normal after the pandemic, just school related?
I hope not.
I think one of the biggest changes is the amount of students missing significant.
Do you feel like this generation of students will have their lives permanently impacted for the worse?
I think it will be permanent. I think students are changing all the time. So I think today's students are different than when I began here in 2010. They missed out on a lot of things that spring, and they were highly affected, just as some of the students in younger grades missed out on some really important experiences in those grades.
On June 8th, 2020, schools began to reopen. A little over a year later, schools were fully in person.
This year especially, I see students thriving a bit more socially, still adjusting and learning what the right way is to go about a conversation, to understand what it means to be a good friend.
Students began to interact with one another once more and learn social interaction expectations. They also learn their own personal boundaries.
I think it's an important life skill to be able to adjust, no matter what it is, whether that's academically, socially, if you're home and, plans change or whatever it might be, you lose a paper for school, you have to adjust, right, and adapt.
By September 27th, 2021, the mask mandate was beginning to be lifted, and community activities began to resume.
The last week of school, I did the last class outside as a lecture for those who wanted to come. And it was really nice. A lot of kids showed up, and we just sat in a circle, and I sort of did what I would do as my last wrap up of the year of US history. And it was really nice to just sort of see people in person again. And I know not everyone came, and that's fine, but I didn't realize how much kids and teachers actually missed school.
But many of the things that we do here and the traditions that we keep and the values that we hold are similar to before.
On May 11th, 2023, the COVID-19 pandemic had been declared over in the United States.